G'day and welcome to the Grow a Small Business Podcast. I'm your host, Troy Truen. Each week, we speak with an owner who has grown a business with 5 to 30 team members to something bigger. Diving into their numbers and unearthing the pain they've experienced, we explore what they did to overcome each barrier and what they would do differently from day one. Let's get into it. Welcome, everyone. Today I'm interviewing Joe Rocky from 412 Homes. He's based in Pittsburgh, United States of America. Thanks for your time today, Joe.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Let's start with how we know each other. We both use the Podmatch platform for me to find guests and you to find podcasts to go on as a guest. Mm-hmm. Tell our audience a bit about your business, what it does and how it makes money.
Yeah. So long story short is I'm strictly within the real estate world here in America. And we basically find properties and turn revenue off of them. And I do that in one of four fundamental ways. Either A, I buy the property, renovate and resell it. We call that flipping over here. We do the traditional rental market where we buy a property, put a tenant in there, collect some checks for a long period of time. We do properties that are not within the footprint I want to operate in, but I've still got them under contract, meaning that individual wants me to sell their house to me. I have a guy who does want to work that house. He'll buy it for more. I keep the spread. And then the final way is the rent to own platform, which I do in a lot of volume that is kind of rare because it's a hybrid approach that real estate doesn't need a hybrid, I guess is one way of saying it. But the fact that we have it, I get the best of both worlds. I get the fact that I have a tenant in there who cares about his property and is ultimately going to become the owner of it. And it really has offshot a lot of the liabilities that most landlords have to deal with that flat out don't exist in my world. And it has been one of the best inventions that spent a long time with a lawyer to overcome. But we came out with that about 17 and got to play with all the Pennsylvania and federal laws over here. And we're really glad that we've done it.
Yeah, it's great. It sounds like a lot of fun. There's a government scheme here in Australia, and I know the UK as well, very similar. It's a great thing to be able to help people get on the property ladder.
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah, absolutely. Because there's so many people out there that for whatever reason have bad credit scores, so banks don't like them. And in my experience, all of my clients have basically fallen in one of two funnels. Either A, they had no idea how credit worked when they were younger, and they just got behind the 8 ball of credit card debt, and that can really get anyone. Or option two is a divorce attorney told them to destroy their credit for their divorce. So either way, I end up getting a lot of people who have good paying jobs and they want to be left alone, but they're just not happy with a bank right now. So we able to fix them with a credit restoration guy, and works out pretty good.
How did you start out?
I started out doing this or real estate in general.
Well, maybe go back to if you went to college or university and take us from there.
Yeah. So I went to Duquesne University, which is right here in Pittsburgh, and went there, got my degree in accounting and finance. Essentially, what I realized early on was skills are what you get paid for, not theories. So accounting, every business in the world needs to know where their money is, and every business needs to know how to get more money. And financing is one of the ways of doing it. The best way of doing it is how I did all my jobs in college was through sales. And that's really what I've essentially excelled on in my life here, my career. That's the underlying glue. A lot of management stuff as well, but it's all driven through sales. So every college job I had, which was the entire duration, except for the semester I spent in Italy, I was selling something. I was, hey, I'm a random college kid. I want to come to your house, show you these really, really sharp knives. It's cool if we hang out for a while. And oh, by the way, you're going to give me $2,500 when I leave. So that's how it went. And it worked out really well. So long story short, I come out of college right in the middle of the subprime recession that we had over here. And no bank whatsoever was happy with landlords, and let alone the economy in general being tanked. You have Lehman Brothers starting the whole collapse. Now the whole finance industry is essentially on fire. We had a couple of major accounting houses got turned off. So I was sitting there in that fall semester of my final year of college, turning down good accounting jobs, because in my world, I always come up with something better. Something better will come along. It didn't. But that being said, it didn't really matter because the people who had accepted those same positions that I had not in November were getting letters in March saying, hey, we got to release people with 30 years experience. We're not bringing on some new kid. And it didn't really matter at the end of the day, but I did need a job. And the one thing that I know that anyone will hire is someone who will sell something, especially if they are commission only, because there's no risk. So that's what I did for 3 years. I was a financial advisor. Really, I was an annuity and life insurance salesman. First year I was rookie of the year. Second year I was underclassman of the year. Third year I left. And the ultimate reason I left is because I was doing 70 hours a week like crazy. I had no control over my product. And basically, anytime the headquarter company wanted to change it, I had nothing to do about it. Like, this is what we have. You have to sell what we have. And it really started bothering me that if I would have met you 3 months earlier, I could have given you a vastly better product than I could today. And that's when I started looking about, let's find a different outcome here. And what I wanted and what I've always wanted and still want was the basis of residual income. I wanted to be able to get paid when I was older for work I did as younger, because I flat out knew me in my 20s was able to do more than conceivably what me in my 50s will be able to do. So why don't we figure out a way to make that money transfer happen? And in 2011, there wasn't a whole lot of options for the residual income model. If you had a utility company, that was residual income. Taxes, you got to pay those every year. But there wasn't really a whole lot of other options, and I wasn't able to buy a utility company.
Yeah.
So basically, it was like rents. That's the only thing I can really dive into and figure out how to do it. So I started going to meetings for where real estate investors hung out. And all it was basically a bunch of landlords coming and complaining about their tenants, which is what landlords do. There's no way around that. And I'd be sitting around these meetings realizing every single guy here is working way less hours than me. They're all making more money than me in the long run, and some of them in the short run as well. And they're all happier. Like, why ain't I doing this? So that was it. I made the transition, went all in. There are some challenges in that notion, but I had always lived my life in 100% commission. So the biggest hurdle, at least the mental one, I was already past. And to me, I think that was the world of difference of being used to that.
And how old were you in 2011 when you started the business up?
25, 24, 25, somewhere in there.
Yeah. Yeah. So the GFC was 2008. A good mate I went to uni with, who was a year or so below me, had a really good job in SAP consulting, but quit in 2008 here in Australia, jumped on a plane, flew to the US, bought a Harley, rode around the US for a year or so and bought 50 properties at the bottom of the market. And he's still over there now every 4 months a year, flipping houses and doing up trailer parks. So it sounds to me like a pretty good move that you both made around that time.
Mm-hmm. It was very difficult in the beginning. So what the problem was for the landlord side was coming out of that recession was banks essentially have to blame someone. You can't go all out of business and not blame someone. And who they chose to blame was the subprime lending. Well, it's not prudent to throw customers under your bus that the entire government is trying to say there's nothing wrong with. So what they went to was who are successful people we can blame and then make them the problem. And that's essentially, they turned at the real estate market. They turned to landlords in particular. So to try to get a loan in the beginning of the immediate aftermath of the recession was basically impossible unless you had an incredible array of units that it was a no-brainer loan where you really weren't getting any value on it. They weren't giving it to you. So that's why I started with flips, was because I needed to be able to make a massive amount of capital and be able to essentially have it sit in this property for a number of years before I'll ever be able to refinance it. And that made it very hard, especially for an impatient 20-something that I was at the time.
Yeah. Then do you have some key numbers you can share to illustrate the growth of the business over those 11 years?
Yeah. So, I mean, like when we look at when I started there, obviously revenue is zero. By the end of the third year with our flips, we were bringing in well over $1 million. By the end of the fifth year with the flips, it was basically triple that.
Yeah.
We figured out what we were doing. And then lo and behold, all three of my crews basically imploded at the same time. I was like, oh no. And I kind of had this like panic attack. I'm in the middle of these three projects. I have all this exposure. Like, I have to finish the house. I mean, there's no option. The house needs finished. We need to turn them into some form of revenue. But do I really want to leave myself out to where these contractors can essentially hang out to dry again? Is that a decision that I want to do? And that I ultimately chose not to. And that was my last flip, 17. And we haven't done them since. And ever since then has been going down the road of rentals, and particularly in the rent to owns. I was already had started that process I mentioned earlier of dealing with a lawyer, figuring out how to legally do these in Pennsylvania. And that was kind of the tipping point, being like, I don't really want to go through this anxiety. I'm sure, obviously, the money's nice. I mean, no one's ever going to be upset about making 5 figures on a deal. But the bottom line is that it also wasn't giving me the long-term residual income I wanted either. It was a nice big check now, which obviously is why people do it, but it wasn't accomplishing the true mission I wanted, which was one day to be able to just say, I'm out, and be able to walk away. Now, granted, in my head, when I was saying I'm out, I walk away, it was going to be under my own wanting to do, not a government official saying I'm not allowed to go to work anymore because I'm not essential. But nonetheless, we were able to survive COVID because essentially of that decision I made back in 2017 to go hard in this direction of the rent to own model.
Yeah. And did you also move away from using contractors and start piling on your own team members?
Well, I mean, they were my team members then. They just did. They were my team members then until the day they weren't. So it wasn't that. I did change the types of properties I bought because I really focused on buying broken stuff.
Yeah,
we're gonna break it. The more broken, the more equity there is for me to fix it up. I kind of shifted into the zone where I'm at now, where it's nice someone can live here, but it's not the Taj Mahal. Like it hasn't been updated in a long time. So there's some effort. If we do upgrade it, it's gonna be worth it, but we don't need to. So therefore, if we get a tenant who can be in there, who wants to do it, wants to make it their own house and has the capability, why don't we just let them do it? And then they'll literally build their own golden handcuffs because they made the bathroom exactly the way they wanted. And I'm not going to do anything for it. Once you start adding up the benefits of this model, it's beyond measure. It's just a lot of legal loopholes to
get there. Sounds like it.
Yeah.
And how many team members do you start with, and how many full-time equivalents are you at now?
So right now it was just me. I mean, or correction, at the beginning it was just me. Now we're at 11.
Yep.
It's just how it grew after time. And all of my people now essentially are in the prospecting side of the fence. Before COVID happened and people were afraid to talk to each other, I would be going through 20 to 40 new properties a week for the purpose of acquisitions. Granted, I bought normally about like one of them.
Yeah.
But the point was we were looking at a lot of stuff because I run a model where it is much better to do less activity, but with better volume, better results than it is to do a lot of volume on minimal results. I get that works a lot, for your commodities you buy, your products of the world, like Budweiser. It's great. You make 6 cents a can, you make 1 billion cans, everyone's happy. I'd way rather make 1 can and make 1 billion off of it. It's a much more stressful life because no one wants that can, you're done. But it's also a much better life if you can figure out how to make a good can.
And how many properties are you up to now?
Right now we have about 40 units. But again, they're all set up with the guy to buy them. So I have no liability exposure. That's most great. People who have 40 units, they are either running themselves into the ground, fixing minor problems, or they're paying someone to do that. And I have figured out a way not to have to do it and not have to pay someone because the tenants essentially are responsible for it. Like I said, it is the best model of all world. The trade-off is that just most tenants don't want to do it. Most tenants don't want to become purchasers of property. So it does take hunting and marketing skills to be able to find the right people. But once you do, it is set it and forget it to the max.
When was the moment you felt like you had succeeded?
Oh, there's a lot of moments I feel like I succeeded. I mean, you walk out of a closing with a check that, you know, the first successful flip we did, which was the second one, I walked out with a net revenue check. Now, so it wasn't all profit, but it was net revenue of six figures, and most of it was profit. And that was, I'm sitting there, I was like, this is more money than I made for the last 3 years. And in terms of the amount of hours I put in per week,
Hmm.
it was nowhere. That was we're definitely never going back. I already knew I couldn't work for someone else, but I knew I was going to figure out that this was the right industry for me to be in.
What does success look like to you?
In a word, it's freedom. I mean, I like the ability that I can take care of who I say I will take care of, and that at the end of the day, I don't need to deal with things that are not efficient or not well designed unless I designed it. If I made it bad. That's on me. But I don't have anyone imposing anything upon me. Again, with the exception of what COVID was.
Yep. Number one thing you'd recommend to marketing a fast growing business?
Do not be afraid of expenses. Most people bottle themselves up and ruin their profitability because of fear of expenses. Obviously you need to make sure for every expense you do, it's going to give you a positive rate of return. But there are so many people out there that are afraid to hire a successful salesperson because of what the cost of it will be. And that's how you kill a business before you ever even start. The number two thing you do is you don't go all in.
Yeah.
Those are the one and two things that a person creating a business will die on.
How did you fund the business? Obviously, there was some bank finance along the way.
At the beginning, it was basically me liquidating everything I had. I'm also young 20s, so it wasn't like it was, I could restart it. I guess that's the way I'm trying to say there. But we also did have hard money lenders, which were specifically designed guys for flips. So that they don't give you nearly all the money. You need to bring a lot of it to the table, but they'll give it to you. You're going to be signing a very high percentage interest rate, and a guaranteed amount that you have to pay interest for, but you just factor it into your numbers and say this is just the cost of money.
Yeah.
And that's how we started. So it was 40% me funding the first 3 years worth of my flips, and 60% from these hard money lending partners.
And did you take any investors along the way, or just yourself?
Well, they ultimately became investors, so they knew that at the end of the day, they get paid by giving out the loans, right? So they knew that I would be good for it. I would pay up on it. We created a track record, and I didn't have to worry about getting funding for my next deal because I knew that they had it for me. So while they weren't true equity partners. They were true finance partners.
Yeah.
Where my equity partners came into play was when I created, particularly in the second half of my career doing this, the companies for buying the properties and selling them to other investors. Those guys are marketing guys that are beyond reproach, in my opinion. They can sit on internet, they can figure out how to get me in front of someone's house, and then ultimately I do the rest. But they get paid a percentage of their action in that, because at the end of the day, I can't sell something I don't have. So I got to be able to get there to be able to have it, and paying them their percentages as equity partners is well worth it.
If you were to start up today with plenty of funding, would you go into your industry?
If it were today, I don't think I would be in real estate. If this was the day I was walking out Equitable saying I'm not doing this anymore, I don't think it would be real estate, because first off, what I thought landlording was 11 years ago and what it is, we're nowhere near the same thing. And I think that's a thing that most landlords fail when they're entering the game. But I would probably enter into one of these companies that are selling a product that is essentially a finite product, but you're able to sell it on a monthly basis. A lot of web products are that. For instance, in my own podcast, the editing software I use, I pay them on a monthly basis. The guy made it once. He created this product once, has been selling it for years, and is collecting a check on it every month since. That's a very enticing model to me. Obviously, I have no idea how to program, so I'm not doing it. But that's probably a direction I would go. I just personally love the residual income model. But granted, you have to know up front that it's going to take a long time until your banks gets refilled, and you have to be willing to have faith in yourself to do it.
Well, maybe give a shout out to your podcast. What's the title of it? And we'll link through to it in the show notes.
So it's called Father and Joe. We created it in 2017. In America, we had a very bad transition between President Trump and President Obama. And pretty much the TV told you that you were either allowed to like one or the other, and you weren't allowed to talk to anyone who was on the other side.
Yeah.
And nowhere in world history has that ever been a good thing when a country has or culture has ostracized one part of itself versus another. It always ends in one of three ways. Either that country goes to war with someone else, that country goes to war with itself in a civil war, or that country commits a genocide, which is just a really one-sided civil war. So not wanting any of that to happen here, we started doing the podcast Father and Joe, where I sit down with a Catholic priest, and we essentially talk about the importance of building up relationships within yourself, and building up relationships with yourself inherently corresponds to relationships around you, and it's a ripple effect that just grows to infinity and beyond. And like I said, I obviously don't get the same reach CNN does, but in my own little way, I wanted to do something to be able to start, and that's what Father and Joe is all about.
Yeah, great. Can you outline the most stressful point in your small business growth journey so our audience can learn from it?
Sure. So I don't know how it is in Australia, but when a utility company sends you a past due notice before they shut your water or power off, it comes in a different Keller envelope than the other ones do. And there was a solid 9-month stretch when I was leveraged out way too much. I knew every single one of those Kellers, and I knew whether it meant 30 days, 10 days, or today for the shutoffs.
Yeah.
And I had that going across like 4 different properties all at the same time. And it was a lot of just hope we get the cash flow of today to be able to cover this afternoon. And the stress that goes behind that is throughout the measure, because obviously if any one of these things get a snag, I left myself no room for error. And, part of the reason was, it was just too good of a deal to pass up. People call that greed, which is really what the problem that started was. I was, like I said, I was in my 20s. I had no idea what reality really was. And I just had my mindset that I'll be able to figure out how to go through this. And it was so, the whole process of waiting for things to happen well were crazy. I listen to a lot of podcasts because part of this job is I'm in the car a lot. I'm driving from job site to job site. And the way that my phone works, and I suppose they all work like this, is that it cuts off the podcast whenever a phone call is about to come in. So if I was listening to someone who deliberately was good at pausing between words, my heart would start jumping, thinking it was a creditor calling me up. And I wasn't really even able to enjoy listening to things. And that's how scary it was there for a hot minute. Like I said, for more than a minute. And that's how we got through it. And obviously on the other side of it, I'm now sitting there with all of this capital, all this happiness, but it really had me sit back and go, we're not going that thin again. No. Sure, great year, big numbers. Accountants can have fun figuring out how to make no taxes on it, but not worth it. And it was a time. It was a time that was also probably better to be single during, instead of putting that stress upon someone else as well.
Yeah. How many months did that cash flow crunch last for?
The reality is probably less than I remember it, but in my head it felt like 9, but it was probably about 4.
Yeah.
But it felt longer, because the other part of it is once the first one sold, it was on a 90-day close. All of it went away because I knew the revenue was coming. But so much of the fear was, when is the revenue coming? Between having 2 houses on the market and 3 of them under construction, it was just when. And also knowing the fact that I couldn't drop the price, because it's like, it needs to sell at this number. So if I drop the price, it actually is hurting me, even though I'm going to get cash now. And it was it was putting yourself in a mathematically tight hole, which was again why we stopped doing that.
Yeah. What area in business do you feel you've had to work on the most to add the greatest value?
Communication, as far as the skill set. I mean, in the beginning, I had no idea how to talk to my crew. And part of it is because I had come from the world of selling to professionals. You know, I was selling to lawyers and doctors who, when they say they're going to be somewhere on time, they're going to be there. You know, they're going to do what they say they're going to do. We're going to fund this life insurance policy with this much money every month. And it's just going to happen because they're professionals and that's what they do. Going into the world of contracting, not the same way at all. And that took a learning curve to be able to how to incentivize people to get what I wanted done, how to disincentivize people in a way that's both ethical and legal, which is not always the same thing, and being able to move it forward. So that I put under all the heading of communication, but that's kind of the nuts and bolts of how we had to get better at stuff.
What have you enjoyed the least about managing fast growth?
Part of it is the process of what you think it's going to be and what it's going to be. Every time I've had the expectations not line up, it has left me felt emptier than any amount of money could fill. You know, because like I said, a lot of what this was set up to do was to be able to have the residual income. And it's all kind of based upon people doing what they say they will. At the end of the day, every business is based upon that. And I'm at a point, and I think that everyone gets this eventually, when it's just like, just do what you're going to say you're going to do. Like I have had so many talks with you. If you keep saying you're going to do this, but you don't. Like, and overall, I had changed my policy. You know, I used to think, you know, you work with people, you play through them. Eventually, they'll figure it out. You just give them enough chances, they'll learn. I'm not quite that way anymore. You know, I used to give a tenant lots of leeway. You know, listen to their sob stories. Think they would come back. They would catch up. No, that ship had sailed, and it is just the way it is. You know, I don't know if one answer is necessarily better or not, but in terms of the way that I run my business, the anxiety I get of listening to someone lie to me has become too much.
What do you love most about growing a small business?
Well, I mean, obviously it's hard to fight the economic success. I mean, that allows me to do that. What it gives me is the most important thing, which is time.
Yeah.
You know, in time for me to choose to do whatever, whether it be start a whole nother business, try to create more patents, see if they work out. Sometimes they do. Normally they don't. But anyway, it's me doing fun stuff that I want to do and exploring inventions. Someone, like I said, some of them play, some of them don't. And the time is really, like I said, the thing that I like the most, and that only really can come from financial independence.
What has been the biggest mindset shift for you in your small business growth journey?
The biggest mindset shift is a comma doesn't mean it's necessarily big in terms of revenue checks. So that was certainly a very important one. The mindset that it has to be all on you and realizing that there's other people you can trust was a big one as well. You know, in the beginning, it was, I had to do this because no one else will be able to. No one else is going to care as much as I do. No one else is going to be capable as I do. And that might even all be true. But at the end of the day, you can't grow that way. And once you get comfortable allowing people to do what you're hiring them to do and them actually being competent, capable of doing it, it is just such a weight off of someone's shoulder. And it's also incredibly more profitable. It's one of those rare times in life that doing something that's helping everyone does actually help everyone and makes everyone better off. There's not enough situations like that. So take advantage of the ones you can. And this is one of them.
The number one habit you think a small business owner needs to develop and maintain?
Communication. You got to be able to communicate with your people in an effective way.
Totally agree.
Be the change you want to see in your business. Become more productive and less stressed with our free Transform Your Performance online course. Once you see the benefits, put your entire team through the course at no cost. We start out by telling you the secret to guaranteed success, then over 100 lessons help you be more focused, present, productive, and feel more in control about work. growasmallbusiness.com.
Can you talk to how you've added people to the team, some wins, mistakes, and advice for those listening?
Well, the number one thing I think I have messed up in hiring is I was not descriptive, articulate enough, foresight enough, whatever the right way of trying to say this is, about what is the person actually going to be doing, whether it be writing it out, saying it, communicating it. Every time I've really messed up has revolved around that problem. Me not being able to explain, this is what I'm hiring you for, and then you make the decision, or you in or out. And the number one thing I would recommend is get a really big grasp of what you're paying people to do. Because if not, they're just going to end up in this twilight zone of they think they're doing what they think they're supposed to be doing. You don't see it. And if you don't know how to correct it, you've lost, and you've lost big. And that can be a cultural problem to fix, depending upon how long you let things go. So I'd say that is the number one mistake I've made, and fixing that has been the number one benefit.
What are some things you recommend to building a sustainable and kick-ass culture to help with the growth?
You got to know what you want. I mean, you got to know what you want your culture to be. And that's going to be different for every person. You know, we all have different personality types. We all have different things we desire. And you got to know what that is. And I'm not saying you're going to hire a bunch of people with the exact same personalities, because that won't work, because different personalities are drawn to different positions. It's just the way that it is. But there are preferences that people have, and people can align themselves on preferences that can ultimately end up being defined into a culture. So that would be my starting point. Figure out what it is that you value the most, and try to keep that as a short list. Because some people will start that list going, they'll have like 26 things on it. It's like, you'll never get that. Four at most. Better 2, but 4 at most. What is your company going to be in 4 descriptive words?
Yeah.
And then you figure out people who have those.
Tell our audience how you've handled balance.
Well, basically, balance has happened. I mean, well, my wife's a big part of that, obviously. Keeping me to stay within time limit parameters, so I'm not, working forever. Because I think that's the trap that I'm on the side of the spectrum of falling in, of just staying constantly engaged, constantly working, and then, oh wow, it's 10 o'clock at night. So that's certainly the side of the spectrum I am prone to fall into. And quite frankly, having made the promise to her that I will give her time, kind of took care of itself, because if I'm going to give her time, I need to be there for it. And that's in essence how it took care of itself.
Yeah. How much professional development have you invested in yourself?
I took a sales coach when I hadn't even left the first job yet. So I was 22. And I've been with a sales coach ever since then. So we're talking 17 years, something like that.
The same coach, or?
Yeah. It ain't broke, don't fix it, man. That's how I look at it.
It's great. And what about, have you had mentors?
Well, yeah, I mean, obviously Danny's one of them. Yeah, there's no doubt about that. Yeah. But yeah, I think I've had much more of whatever the opposite of mentor is than actual mentors. Mm-hmm. There were so many bosses I had that it was just, I'm never going to do that. I'm never going to let my company become that. Yeah. And that ultimate problem and situation has been, like I said, I don't know what the word for that, anti-mentor or whatever, but that has kind of driven the process a lot. And I still get thoughts of bad situations I was in because of horrible management that really benefited no one at the end of the day, but he got to feel right. So kudos.
I got a word for it. It's called an asshole.
Oh, that's exactly what it was. Yeah.
My one and only real job out of uni before I started my own companies for 3 years was a big accounting firm. You'd know it, PricewaterhouseCoopers, and I had a few different managers, but One in particular just stands out. And I was just reflecting on him the other month in this one incident. And you're right, it sets the tone for, right, when I start my own companies, I'm never going to treat people that way. And an interesting fact, around 70% of people quit their manager. They don't quit their job. They quit because their manager's incompetent, doesn't care, or is an asshole, or the above.
Oh, that's true. I mean, there's just very few people. I mean, you think about it, this would be the other 30%. There's just very few people that walk in, take a job, and have no idea what it is. Most people have an idea of what they're going to do. And I've always looked at it in that 30%. I'm probably the one who messed up. I probably didn't describe the job for what it is. Now, I see no problem with someone leaving because of life reasons. I'm getting married. We're moving, whatever. I don't want to be a stay-at-home mom. I don't care about any of that. Like I don't look at that as a failure. Yeah, I got to go hire someone new, but that's life, man. Go do what you got to do. But yeah, I don't think I've ever had anyone actually truly walk out on me for that reason.
Yep.
I mean, like I said, I've had people who's like, Joe, this isn't what I thought it was going to be. Yep. And I've looked at them like reality, like, this isn't what I thought it was going to be either. So it's like, we're both at a spot where we don't like this. 2 of the 3 times it was better to just call it a day. The third one, we figured out like how to make it work. And it was one of the best situations ever. They actually ended up eventually becoming a partner.
Yeah. Do you have a board of directors or advisors?
No, I don't listen to people.
All right, Joe, we're on to our final 5 questions. What do you think is the hardest thing in growing a small business?
The hardest thing is being able to handle it all mentally. You're going to deal with a lot of things that are going to tell you no. I mean, there's just no way around that. And to be able to overcome those objections, and really it's being able to tell what is a true objection and what isn't. I think that's something that people put themselves on a lot of mistakes with. They're not saying no because they don't like you. They're saying no because the product isn't as good as something else. And then you look in and go, is that a valid reason, or is this just a one-off experience? And being able to go through that process of analyzing rejection and figuring out why it's coming. Sometimes it's just people who don't want to see you succeed. That's part of life. And being able to tell what it is, who's driving it, is massive. So that skill set of overcoming objections, rejection, and being able to differentiate the two, you need to have that mindset or you'll never be able to succeed as a business owner.
Favorite business book which has helped you the most?
There's 2. Extreme Ownership by Yocko. I guess it's technically not a business book, it's a war book, but that's one. Everything ultimately comes down to you, no matter what position you're at. So it's your life. No one else is living your life. I mean, it might not be their business, but it's their life. So that's certainly one of them. And then in terms of system building, the 4-Hour Workweek is a great book about how to build systems. It really is.
Any great podcasts or online learning tools you use for your own professional development?
I actually do not listen to business podcasts. I use podcasts as my escape from business, essentially. The entertainment is what I go with there.
One tool you'd recommend to help grow a small business?
Well, aside from money, I would recommend resiliency. Figure out a way to center yourself where the business does not become your identity. So many people mess that up. This is more of a men problem, just for what it is. We have this mentality that we can compartmentalize everything. I can be this way as a brother. I can be this way as a driver on the road. I can be this way as a business owner. I can be this way as someone trying to date someone. The reality is in the long run, you can't. You might be able to make it through a short-term stressful situation, dealing with that, like cramming for a test or something. You can't do that in the long run. And what you really need to do is get essentially your own center together. And the way that I found that is effective for anyone, regardless of who you are, what your background is, whatever, is basically focus upon 4 things. And they're all inner things, so you can control them. The first one being knowledgeable. Be knowledgeable about what you're talking about and what you're doing, whether that be, as you said, listening to podcasts, reading books, know what's going on. The second one being have an internal courage or conviction that when something comes up in conversation and you feel you need to say something or get it out of you, that you do it. Even if it comes out clumsy or stuttery or not necessarily desirable, figure out a way to get that emotion, phraseology, whatever it is, out of you. And that's incredibly important. And then the next one being the third one that we all can control is, in America, it's called humility, even though it's basically dead here. You have to know that you are not the most important person on this planet, nor are you the most insignificant person on this planet. You kind of need to know your balance spot of where you belong in the entire process. And when you know that, it really helps all these questions you asked before about how do you find your balance? How do you find your centering? Well, I know I'm not the most important person. I do know that my business needs to succeed for my employees and their families get a paycheck. So there's a reason to do this. But at the end of the day, that doesn't make me better than them. If the salesperson doesn't make the sale, it's going to hurt us all. You know, if the person who's in charge of putting me in the properties to go buy them, and we're not able to be in the right neighborhoods anymore where we're going to make money in them, well, that's a failure that eventually will affect us all. And the fourth one is justice. And essentially what justice is in this context is treating everyone based upon their merit. You know, not saying I'm hiring you to fulfill a quota system. I'm not hiring you so that it looks good on a company card, but you are actually the most qualified person for this position based upon what I want to pay for it. That clause needs to be said as well. But you're only hiring based upon that, not because it's your brother-in-law and you just don't want to get yelled at. This is the best person giving all the restrictions we have that I can have there. And you're only getting fired likewise because you didn't fulfill your end of the obligation. And to me, that justice is, you know, it's a mindset that people say you don't have, but the successful, enduring companies are built around that. That's really the ticket between short, big profit and sustained long-term sustainability. Because people that aren't just end up becoming those managers that you don't want to be around. They're playing favorites. You know, he lets her get away with anything because he's trying to get with her. You know, well, we've all know how those businesses end up working. The good people who actually are successful, they leave.
Yeah. Finally, my favorite question. What would you tell yourself on day one of starting out?
It's going to work. It's going to work. Just believe in yourself. It'll work. So many people don't have that. So many people start with I hope it works. It might work. It's going to work. It's going to work because I'm the one who's doing it. That's just the way it is. So you obviously need to have confidence. Can't be foolhardy, but there's a certain element that we all have that just says, I'm going to make this work. And that goes back to the book, Extreme Ownership, as I mentioned before. Just the way it is. It's going to work.
Fantastic. Thanks very much for your time today, Joe. I've really enjoyed chatting, hearing your journey. Really exciting stuff. Over 11 years, starting on your own now, 11 full-time equivalents and 40 units, and also helping the lives of those that can't get on the property ladder. So you're making money and doing good things. And congratulations on your success so far.
Well, thank you. Yes, thank you.
And for our audience, we'd greatly appreciate a review in iTunes or whatever platform you listen to us on. More reviews means we bubble up higher in iTunes, etc. So more business owners looking for podcast help with their growth will find us.